Okay. Welcome, everybody, to the Tuesday, September 12th Transportation Policy Body Meeting for the Wichita Area Metropolitan Planning Organization, commonly referred to as WAMPO. Okay, for the viewing audience, we don't have a very large agenda today. Welcome, everybody. Don't know if we have any new members. I think we're all right. And so let's just move to the regular business. Okay. First item is the approval of the September 12th agenda, which is today.
Moved.
Second.
I'll second it then. Okay.
Any questions? Being none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item B, approval of the August 8th, 2017 minutes, which was last month. Everybody moved to approve? Second by Claire. Any discussion? Being none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. All right, at this time, public comment. Is there anybody from the public that would like to address the policy body? And I don't see anybody that wants to, so we'll move on to the next item. Also, just as a reminder, we had a little make sure your microphones, if you're going to speak, is back in front of you, if you choose to speak whenever. So we'll go to the new business items. This is an action item. It's our MAP 21 Transit Asset Management Performance Measures. Welcome, Chris Upchurch, to the podium.
Thank you. So I will try and keep this short and sweet. I know some of y'all have been here for a while already. I'm here to talk to you today about transit asset management performance measures. You may recall that I've been up here several times in the past few months talking about performance-based planning. That's the process where we measure performance based on our goals and use the results to inform future planning. In this case, though, these are a little different because they're not WAMPO's goals, the way the performance measures we've talked about so far have been. These are national goals. And that's because when they passed the Moving Ahead for Progress in the 21st Century Act, they had a requirement for the U.S. Department of Transportation to establish some national performance measures in the areas of pavement, bridges, safety, system performance and freight, and transit asset management. And then states and MPOs are required to set targets for those measures and then to measure their performance using these. So again, national goals. Now, the other thing that's a little different when we're getting into these MAP 21 performance measures is we're not operating in a vacuum the way we are with the WAMPO measures, where we're the first ones taking a cut at them. For all of these, the state DOTs have first cut at these. They set performance measures for the entire state. Now, for the transit asset management measures, we also have an additional party with an interest here, Wichita Transit. And they also have set targets for this measure. So the way it's working here in the WAMPO region, we have Wichita Transit, who has set their own targets. And then we have the Kdot targets, which effectively here just apply to the paratransit providers. These are the folks who provide on-demand transit services to the elderly and the disabled. Now, unlike most of the other measures I've talked to you about or will talk to you about, we really do not have a ton of data on the state of transit asset management. And part of that's because when Congress passed MAP 21, they required all of the transit agencies to prepare transit asset management plans by October 1st, 2018. However, in their infinite wisdom, they required everyone to set targets more than a year in advance of the plan, when the plan is what has all the information on how you're performing and how you're going to achieve those targets. So we don't have any of the information that's going in the plan since those are more than a year out, but we're still required to set targets now. So on to these performance measures. For rolling stock and equipment, the performance measure is the percentage of vehicles in each class that have exceeded their useful life benchmark. And two areas of this I want to pull out. When we're talking about classes, all we're doing there is grouping similar vehicles together. So all the full-size buses, all the vans, all the minivans, just group the like stuff with like. The useful life benchmark is just an expectation of how long we think a particular vehicle is going to last in service. Now, FTA has come out with a big list of classes and of useful life benchmarks for each class, and transit agencies can just pick that up directly and use it, and that's what Kdot has done. They can also customize the classes and the useful life benchmarks based on their particular conditions, and Wichita Transit has done a little bit of that. So here's the example of the Kdot Targets. You can see the different classes there, the useful life benchmark for each class. Basically, your bigger, heavier duty vehicles tend to last longer than just ordinary regular cars that have been appropriated for transit use. And then finally, the last column are the targets, the percentage of vehicles beyond the useful life benchmark. You can see that Kdot has set these targets at 25% for every single class. They're suffering sort of the same issues we are in terms of lack of data, so take that with the appropriate size grain of salt. And here's the Wichita Transit targets. You can see they have classed their vehicles a little differently. They've tweaked the useful life benchmark in a couple of cases, and then you can see they do have some fairly big variation in their targets. For instance, their full-size buses, only 17% beyond the useful life benchmark, is their forecast. Pretty good. On the other hand, rubber tire trolleys, which those are the trolley-looking ones that are used for the Q line service, 100% of those are they're beyond the useful life benchmark. So those are the Wichita Transit targets. Of course, for providing transit service, it's not just vehicles. You also have some fixed facilities. And these are rated a little bit differently. They have a 5-point scale, and basically the assumption is if you're 3.0 or up, pretty good condition. So the ones we're targeting with the performance measure are those that are below 3.0 on that 5-point scale. So here's the Kdot targets. You can see the 4 classes there, and again, 25%. And these are the Wichita Transit targets. You can see they've grouped their administrative and maintenance facilities together since they just have one location for both, and then their passenger and parking. And their targets, they're saying they're doing really good, 0% below that 3.0 benchmark. So given the dearth of data and given the differences in classes and useful life benchmarks between Wichita Transit and these Kdot targets, frankly, staff struggled a bit coming up with a sensible proposal for targets on this. What we ended up coming up with, and what TAC has recommended, is that we, for now, adopt the Wichita Transit targets with respect to Wichita Transit's fleet, and then adopt the Kdot targets with respect to all of these smaller paratransit providers. But this is not the last word. By late 2018, we should have the transit asset management plans from both the state and from Wichita Transit. And that'll provide an opportunity to revisit this with a little more data, and we can come back and look at these and see if these are still appropriate set of targets. So, questions?
So we're required to approve or vote to approve now targets, and I assume you guys have had great discussion with Wichita Transit about these.
But we've had some
Live.
discussion with Wichita Transit and with the transit folks at Kdot about these, and this is the solution that we have come up with.
Yes, Richard, sorry.
So what are these going to be used for?
They're essentially going to be used to assess how well transit in this region are maintaining their vehicles and their facilities.
Will that trigger some sort of requirement to?
There are absolutely no consequences, not just for us, but for the state or for the transit agencies if you miss the targets. There are for some of the other federal performance measures, but for transit asset management, they are basically, I don't want to say symbolic, but there are no concrete consequences. There's no funding cuts or anything like that. You got to set the targets and you got to report how well you did, but if you missed your targets, there's no concrete consequence to that.
Are we kind of do we have any flexibility? You're using the useful life benchmark. I mean, can we only use that, or do we have flexibility in
We-
what the criteria is?
We have to use the performance measure that the feds have laid out. So, for example, for rolling stock and equipment, it has to be the percentage of vehicles in each class beyond the useful life benchmark. Now, we can adjust transit agencies and essentially us by extension could change classes, could adjust the useful life benchmark up and down, and we have complete flexibility in choosing what percentage we set that target at. But you have to essentially use this structure where you're judging vehicles by how many of them are beyond a useful life benchmark.
Explain how they came to the useful life benchmark and I just missed it, or it- what is a useful life?
Useful life benchmark, it's just an assessment of how long we think these vehicles are going to last in the particular type of service that they're being used for.
Years?
It's in years, yes.
And just so you know, I'm asking these questions because we just had a briefing in Sedgwick County today. You know, our current policy is basically about the years, but now we're going to move to a point system based upon maintenance, some other things that based upon a study in Minnesota, so that you can get the biggest bang for your buck, and which I think is the best way to do it, and that's why I'm asking that. I guess my last question is I'd like to get a list of how the city would, the variation between the city of Wichita and what was published by the feds, or whatever, whatever they say, and how we varied. So.
Sure, I can actually tell you here on the useful life benchmark. The two that are a little different in terms of the ULB are the van ones here, the ones that are 6 years, you can see there. And Wichita Transit's justification is essentially they're using them harder than average, so they aren't getting as much life out of them as other providers that don't use them as heavily are doing. So those are the two where they've changed the useful life benchmark.
6 from what?
8. So you can see basically everything less than a cutaway bus that was built for transit service is basically 8 years under the federal sort of reference guidelines, but Wichita Transit has reduced it to 6.
So there's no maximum number of years as there is with school buses?
No, you can keep on using vehicles for as long as you can keep them going, and of course there are separate safety standards and that sort of thing. Actually, if you look at the federal list, there is a listing for historic trolleys, for like places that are still using very old rail trolleys, and the useful life benchmark for that is over 100 years because they're historic.
So I'm seeing again, so the MAPS 21, the U.S. Department of Transportation is requiring us to set targets for these measures.
Yes.
So we're just setting the targets, but according to the write-up, there's no performance.
There's no consequences
There's no
if
smiley
we or if the
faces.
transit providers or the state don't miss the target.
So we're taking Wichita Transit for the categories Wichita Transit's weighed in on, and then the balance we're using the Kdot.
Well, we're using Wichita Transit for the Wichita Transit fleet for their vehicles, and then we're using the Kdot targets for all of these smaller paratransit providers, folks like Starkey, for instance.
So we're doing it on the fleet, or basically, and then you also have to do one on the facilities.
Yeah, and same thing. And frankly, I don't even know that anyone other than Wichita Transit actually has facilities, but Kdot did set these statewide facility targets.
Okay, and then it can be adjusted over the course of between now and the deadline of October of 18.
Yeah, actually, this one, I believe, can be adjusted at any time. It's just after October 18, we'll have more information, so we can make revisit this and potentially make a better decision once we have more info.
Okay. Clear as
We really
mud.
don't know how they came to these decisions.
No, we don't.
We have no data given to us
No,
that 14 years is good.
no. And believe me, I've asked, but no.
Okay, any other dialogue?
I'd move to approve the performance targets as presented.
I'll second.
Been a motion and a second. Any other questions or comments? Being none. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Chris, appreciate it. Other business, I'll just comment that, remember the slide presentation that we have about what is WAMPO, why is WAMPO? We did get a chance to present that, I presented that to the Derby City Council. Very well received, I thought. Jack, what do you think? It was very informative.
Positive comments.
And ironically, then the Derby, what's the name of your newspaper? Anyway, the Derby newspaper, Informer, did an article about it, which also informed their citizens. So we did the same presentation Saturday morning to SCAC, and a lot of the members were present. I mean, so basically the announcement is, we've got 20 member cities, and if you want this presentation presented to your city council or your government agency, just let us know, and we'll set up a time to do that either at a meeting or at a special meeting or informally, whatever. But anyway, it seems to be well received, very explanatory. The SCAC discussion was really robust about that. The Derby one was a little more formal. They had a few questions, but it was in their deal. So I think we're making progress on what is WAMPO about. So we did not have an executive meeting, and I don't know, Phil, you got anything to report? Okay. Anybody else have anything?
I'd like to bring
Troy?
one thing up.
Yeah.
Many have probably heard that there's an amphitheater coming to Andover. Currently, it looks like it'll be finished around November 19th. And I really bring it up because I think it might have a regionally significant impact on our area, and also Yorktown Road will probably be expanded, which goes right into Kellogg, or Highway 54. And I don't know, I just thought I'd bring it up because I think that as we have concerts and we're planning on 3 to 5 concerts a year, it might be something, bus lines from Wichita to there and back might be something to think about, or, I'm not sure the impact regionally, but we hope there's a big one, so.
Well, there seems to be an acceptance of mainly the trolley. I mean, I think we saw a report where last year at this time for a month, there was like 600 rides, 500. And then a year later with the expansion of the hours and whatever, and we're up to like 12,000 rides. So it's a significant, so there is some awareness of the trolley world of moving around. So something like getting into Derby or getting out to the county fair or something like that, maybe that is something we ought to think about. So, yes, sir, Claire.
We kind of following in Andover's footsteps. We
Into the microphone. There you
we
go.
think we thought we had a need for an amphitheater, and so we're having our first free concert the 23rd. Going to have an art show in the afternoon and a concert from 7 to 9 to see what kind of crowd possibilities we have. And the way it's taken off, I think we're going to have a pretty good crowd. And so we hope to have an amphitheater before too long.
Very good.
Let's not do concerts on the same day or same week. We could just kind of every other weekend or something.
We're
And
bringing a Mays graduate and a WSU graduate that went back to New York City and has done pretty good in the music world. And he's also a professor there. So we got a grant where he's putting on a workshop with the schools, and then they'll have his concert from 7 to 9 on Saturday.
well, in the trend of concerts and theaters, Wichita City Council's having a special meeting tonight to discuss the future of Century 2, a small venue there that kind of an interest regionally significant. Anyway, so you tune in or you can attend. All right. Anything else? Okay, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for being here.